Right now, we're witnessing less of an effort to reach a ceasefire and more of a grand diplomatic game, where three major players are maneuvering to end the war at the negotiating table, each on their own terms. Every party is sticking to its strategy, unwilling to concede. It's already clear that this war won't be decided solely on the battlefield. Its outcome will be settled at the negotiating table. If not today, then eventually. That's why both Russia and Ukraine are focusing their efforts on securing the most favorable positions before talks begin. Ukraine, for instance, launched an offensive in Russia's Kursk region to improve its leverage, though much of its gains have since been lost. Meanwhile, Russia has spent most of 2024 on the offensive, reclaiming initiative. Ironically, the person most eager for peace right now is not Putin or Zelensky. It's Donald Trump. Still, even he isn't ready for peace at any cost, and these are just the opening positions. Thanks to Trump's efforts, a real negotiation process has finally begun, leading to modest success. An energy truce was brokered, and despite its ambiguities, it's largely being respected. There are also preliminary agreements for a naval ceasefire, not yet in effect, but according to U.S. officials, it's close. These deals have brought Ukraine almost nothing and mostly benefit Russia. For example, in exchange for the naval truce, the U.S. agreed to help lift certain sanctions on Russia. Zelensky, however, offered a glimpse into his reasoning at a recent European summit. By making these steps, I clearly showed that we are ready for a ceasefire. But you'll see now that Putin is not. In other words, Ukraine's president admitted he accepted a disadvantageous truce just to prove that Russia would break it. A calculated move in this broader diplomatic game. I've recently joked a lot about the Crivier School of Diplomacy. But on a serious note, Ukraine does have a strategic plan, one that may well succeed. So does Russia. And yes, so do the United States, even though many say, Trump doesn't have a plan. He does. People just don't like it. America has strong reasons to want peace, especially from Trump's perspective. He wants a Nobel Peace Prize. The U.S. needs to cut spending. The U.S. has no vital strategic interest in Eastern Europe. America could profit from ending the war. On that last point, beyond the so-called resource deal the U.S. wants to impose on Ukraine, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has confirmed that Russia and the U.S. are discussing resuming gas exports to Europe via Nord Stream 2. The U.S. could also act as a mediator in other areas of Russian foreign trade. This would pull Russia closer into the American orbit and away from China. Sanctions and war have drawn Russia toward China, Iran, and North Korea. But if the war ends, Russia's economy could re-dollarize and pivot westward. For Washington, this would be a win. Still, Trump can't afford to turn Ukraine into another Afghanistan. The U.S. withdrawal from Kabul was a disaster, one Trump initiated and Biden merely finished. While Trump successfully shifted the blame to Biden, he can't risk appearing weak again early in a new term. That makes it harder to force peace quickly, and in practice, the U.S. has limited leverage. Over Russia, Washington has almost none, aside from more sanctions which often backfire. For example, sanctioning Russian oil drives up its global price, contradicting Trump's goals. Sanctions take time, while the war could continue for years. As for Ukraine, America's influence is also constrained by three factors. U.S. support is large but not exclusive. The EU provides substantial aid too. The war's nature, especially in defense, doesn't require huge military aid. Ukrainian society hasn't yet reached a critical breaking point, and the army remains highly capable. Let's talk numbers. According to the Kiel Institute tracker, in 3 years, Ukraine received $114 billion from the U.S., $64 billion in military, $46 billion in financial aid. From the EU, Ukraine got $46 billion in financial support. Funding for Ukraine is secured through 2025 and partially into 2026. Even the U.S. share for this year can't be canceled by Trump. Biden transferred it to the World Bank in advance. Military aid, the U.S. accounted for about half the total, but Trump could only block the remaining 10% of that aid, most of which is already delivered. And Ukraine doesn't burn through supplies instantly, it has stockpiles. In fact, in 2023, Ukraine went about half a year without U.S. aid, yet launched a successful offensive in the Kursk region in August. The real shortages are in air defense munitions and artillery shells, but not enough to collapse the front. Looking ahead to 2025, 2025, Germany, 7B in military aid, France, 2B, UK, 5.6B, Italy, 1.7B. Ukrainian media counted 40B and pledged aid for 2025. However, much of that is civilian-focused, like Norway's 7.5B for reconstruction and investment in Ukraine's defense industry, with delayed returns. Many promises are symbolic. For example, the UK's 1.8B will go to producing short-range air defense missiles in Belfast for delivery by 2030. These won't help in the current war. But here's the thing. Ukraine can keep fighting without them. Over two-thirds of casualties on both sides now come from drones, FPV kamikazes, and bomb drops. The war is run by drone infantry, transforming traditional warfare. The front lines aren't continuous trenches anymore. They're scattered hideouts where a few soldiers stay underground 24/7 to avoid drones. From a recent Medusa article, I spent 12 days at one position and didn't spend even 30 minutes outside. I stepped out to pee. One drone was already above me, then another showed up and dropped a grenade. And this applies equally to both sides. Ukraine may even have an edge in drone warfare. A year ago, it created dedicated drone forces. Russia is now playing catch-up. Behind those hideouts are drone units, the real firepower of both armies. This makes large-scale offensives or frontline logistics nearly impossible. Attacking is costly and difficult, but defending is relatively cheap. You don't need billions monthly to hold the line, and Ukraine has proven that throughout 2024. Yes, by late 2024, Ukraine showed signs of exhaustion, notably a surge in desertions 2023, 24,000 criminal cases for desertion 2024, 90,000 D 2024 alone, 17,500 cases, but the front didn't collapse. Russia gained some ground in Donbas, moving up to 5 km per month, a record for them, but failed to achieve breakthroughs. Pokrovsk wasn't taken. No major urban centers fell. Ukraine regained ground in Kursk. Russia failed to push beyond the Donbas agglomeration. As I wrote last year, the battle is between Ukraine's defensive endurance and Russia's offensive capacity. Result: Russia's offensive ran out first. A few days ago, CIA Director Ratcliffe and Pentagon Intel Chief Cruz testified before Congress. When asked if Ukraine might collapse this year, Cruz said, "We don't see an imminent collapse of Ukraine's defense lines at this time." On how long Russia could fight? From a military standpoint, Russia can sustain its campaign longer than Kiev, but we don't have a precise timeline for Ukrainian exhaustion. So U.S. intel believes Ukraine can hold out through 2024. Michael Kaufman from the Carnegie Endowment echoed that view. When I returned from the front in February, it was clear that things were tough, but better than I expected in the fall. Ukraine doesn't need a ceasefire in the next few weeks or months. In short, Washington knows it can't force peace by cutting aid, not right away. Zelensky, who may overestimate his army, likely sees the situation as even more favorable. Hence Ukraine's strategy: keep fighting and aim for better terms later. Because what's offered now is almost nothing, just a frontline freeze and a resource deal. Many Ukrainians ask, why do we even need Trump for this, if we can negotiate the same directly with Putin? Trump talks about stopping the war to save lives, but neither Putin nor Zelensky are motivated by humanitarian concerns. To them, soldiers are faceless units. Their deaths don't justify stopping. They want their place in history. As long as they have resources, they'll keep going. Ukraine's strategy has a weakness. Without shifting Western attitudes, the outcome might not improve. The same deal might be offered 6 months from now. We've seen this before. In 2024, Ukraine hoped that strategic defense would force better peace terms. It blunted Russia's advance, but got no improved offers. Russia could do the same. Launch another offensive, then end up with the same terms. So Ukraine needs something to change in that time.
Two goals emerge. Convince Trump that Russia is breaking the truce. Pull Europe deeper into the war. Zelensky admitted that he accepted the truce just to prove Putin wasn't sincere. Ukraine has since pledged to give the U.S. proof of Russian violations.
The aim? Shift Trump's pressure from Kyiv to the Kremlin. Will it work? Unlikely. Zelensky still believes in idealism, a mindset rooted in Ukraine's early wartime experience. Back then, Western interests aligned with Ukraine's. That's no longer the case. Trump operates in hard reality. He wants the war over. Not morally, but practically. And it's easier to pressure Ukraine than Russia, so he'll likely ignore truce violations and pretend all is well. If Trump can't secure peace, he may just end U.S. support and walk away. No aid to Russia, but no interference either. This echoes Vietnam. Once America decided to exit, it ignored violations. That let North Vietnam win. Ukraine's second strategy is to draw NATO in, or at least some members. Talk of peacekeepers is louder now. France and the UK supposedly support sending forces. Russia can't fight NATO. And Putin has shown no real will for nuclear escalation. Kyiv believes that deploying Western troops won't trigger consequences. Instead, it will show Russia's weakness. Ukraine's 9-month hold on Kursk was meant to prove that even occupying a nuclear power's territory can go unanswered. Zelensky put it bluntly, "We want European soldiers to fight, not peacekeepers. We're talking air, land, and sea." Right now, these troops would be stationed behind the front, guarding key infrastructure. But Kyiv sees it as a first step. Putin did the same with North Korean troops. At first, just visible, then confirmed, then deployed. Zelensky likely believes Macron and Starmer will agree, maybe misunderstanding polite assurances as real intent. But every source suggests actual deployment is less likely now. Still, Zelensky has a reason to hope, because it worked before. Ukraine resisted, then got aid, launched offensives, then got tanks, then cruise missiles, then F-16s. Why not soldiers next? But Western soldiers are not the same as weapons. France and Britain may support Ukraine, but they won't want casualties. Their publics won't tolerate it. And yes, this is how World War III could start. Not with nukes, but slow escalation. AP recently reported, citing Ukraine's general staff, that Russia plans a massive 6 to 9 month offensive across 1,000 kilometers, targeting Sumy, Kharkiv, and Zaporizhzhia. I doubt it. Russia lacks the resources. But Ukraine got its narrative into Western media. Russia is the one escalating. Will it matter? Probably not. The U.S. trusts its own intel, so Ukraine's plan may not work. Allies are near their limit. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Zelensky's instincts are right. They often have been. Maybe Trump will keep supporting Ukraine to avoid looking weak. Maybe France and the UK will send troops. Who knows? And don't forget, sanctions are still hitting Russia. Oil and gas production is falling. Economic stagnation is here. Russia is resilient, but not unbreakable. Zelensky expects Russia's economy to be in real trouble by 2026-27. He's not betting on collapse now, but believes pressure should increase. Russia, too, is playing the long game. It wants a truce, but on its terms. It's demanding U.S. help in lifting EU sanctions. Meanwhile, Trump keeps saying Putin wants peace and calls him a friend. Russia doesn't want a ceasefire as a gift from Trump. It wants one that feels like a victory. Right now, the ball is in America's court. Trump must decide whether to accept Russia's naval truce demands and lift sanctions early, what to do about Ukraine rejecting the resource deal and debt recognition, how to handle Europe's sabotage of U.S. diplomacy. The easiest option, pressure Ukraine. End aid, blame them for rejecting the deal, and wait. Intel says the front won't collapse. Maybe Ukraine becomes more flexible, because war fatigue is growing.
Bussification has entered the Ukrainian lexicon. Conscription is everywhere. Even pro-government sources can't ignore it anymore.